let's jump in to today, relationship rules. This is part 2 that we're in. I don't know if you've been here very long or not, but if you have, at least a few weeks, you've probably figured something out about me. I love food. Boy, do I. I love food. I love really good food. I like high quality, like the best food, right? And what I've learned, the older I've gotten, the best meals take longer to prepare. Like there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. There's a lot, I mean, if you're going to smoke it on the grill all day is the best way. And it tastes so amazing. And the best meals that I make disappear the fastest. That's what I know. You throw it on the table, you put the plates out there, and immediately it's like it's gone right away. It takes a long time to build, takes a long time to put into, and then all of a sudden, it is gone. And it's similar to our relationships, though. Because you can take years and years to build a depth of foundation, a depth of relationship with someone. And you go through the highs and the lows. And then in just a very brief moment, all of a sudden, it's gone. A word that is spoken, a couple sentences, a conversation where you share an opinion because you feel compelled to share an opinion. And in so doing, you prioritize your perspective on something that really has no bearing. It's just an opinion. And that elevation over the relationship is detrimental to the relationship itself. And you find yourself at odds with one another. Someone that you used to trust, someone that you used to do things with, and all of a sudden you don't do things with them any longer. That advice that was not asked for, that opinion that was shared too many times. Maybe it was even the correction. I don't know if you've had this happen. This is super fun. When you're trying to do something and all of a sudden someone comes alongside you like, hey, you should do it this way. And you're like, I did not ask for evaluation. I just was doing it on my own. I did not realize this was a group project. Thanks for the input. I will not be asking. By the way, I didn't ask. And it's like those things that just get worked into the relationship that drive a wedge between you and somebody else. And sometimes even over a long period of time, you have that a foundation built up, and still it can end quickly, right? What we're talking about, I learned some things this week I'm going to share with you. Relationship entropy. Relationship entropy. A relationship unattended will move to a place of conflict rather than peace. Entropy is a measure of disorder. So it measures the chaos. It's, the second law of thermodynamics, I don't know if you're familiar with these, I learned, but the second law of thermodynamics essentially says that all systems tend to maximize entropy, meaning that every single system that's in place will naturally move towards chaos, not towards peace. And that is absolutely true in our relationships as well. Maybe a good example of this is the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't know if you've ever been there, if you've ever seen it. It is not small. And it's beautiful. It's like amazing, right? This big, bright red bridge. Well, they have to paint it. And I don't know if when you were there, if you saw them working on it, right? Painting it. They constantly paint it. They are never not painting it. You know why? Because this is part of the maintenance. The salt air that the bridge is obviously nearby is always working to corrode the bridge. And so in order to maintain it, they have to continue to paint it consistently, nonstop, forever and ever, amen. Like that is what's necessary in order for the bridge to be to maintain its health, essentially. That's the same with relationships. Like there's no moment where you're like, okay, we got there, we're good, built the foundation, now just let it right off into the sunset. That's not how relationships work. They move back towards chaos automatically on their own without any attempt or any effort on our part. So you might have this huge effort to build the relationship, but if you don't continue to maintain it, to put into it, to value it that way, it will move from peace to chaos fairly quickly. I don't know if you've experienced this on your own. But what are some of the things working against us in relationships? Have you thought about this? Sometimes you just realize you're like, man, why is it so hard? We talked about this last week. Relationships are hard. Why is it so difficult? What is it that it feels like it's actually working against me? It's not just like it's a non-entity. It's not that it's a non-value. It's that it's working against me. And like I said, I talked about this already, but difference of opinions, right? There's two individuals in a relationship. Doesn't matter if it's a marriage relationship. Doesn't matter if it's a father-son relationship. Doesn't matter if it's a co-worker relationship. Any type of relationship at all. There's two individuals in that, and each individual wants the other individual to see the world exactly like them, right? Because we have opinions because we think it's correct. None of us have an opinion that we're like, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm stomping my foot down because I have a wrong opinion about this. No, you have an opinion because you think it is right. There's something else at work, and this is kind of a tangent, but as I was preparing this message, I thought this is important because I haven't heard this said a whole lot, and I think it's valuable. The older that I get, the more I realize that relationships become harder and harder. And there's a couple factors in there. One of them is, as you get older, you just get more tired. I'm just like, I don't know if I want to go out again. Like, I just think it's better if I just stay home today. I know I value your friendship just at a distance at this time. Like this, I'll see you next month maybe. There's that in play. But there's also, we have things that are in our life that didn't used to be in our life. When we evaluate the relationships we used to have, it was so easy, right? You could hang out whenever you wanted. Like at a drop of a hat, you're just like, yeah, let's go do something right now. Today, you tell me to let's go do something right now. I'm like, well, we got to fit this in my schedule. I've got Luke. I've got my wife. Like, we've got to figure these things out in order to make a plan. We can't just do this like willy-nilly. That's not how we do life anymore because we're adults. And this is, the difficulty here is we often think back to previous seasons and we compare those previous seasons to our current seasons. And those previous seasons are like the glory days. Oh my goodness, those relationships, they were so deep and they were so meaningful and so fruitful and they meant so much to me. And then we try to bring that into our present. And the problem is that won't fit into our present because our present season is a different season entirely. They're different. They're not one for one. It's different. And to be honest with you, if you try to drag those old friends back into this season to do the same things, they wouldn't be able to either because they're in the same season that you're in. Life has changed. So we should not try to bring our past back into our present because that's going to affect our current situation, our current relationships. It's going to affect our future relationships. To try to continue to look back, we should not put our time and energy and effort into trying to recreate what once was. Celebrate it, yes. But try to recreate it now, it won't fit. It won't work. And you'll just be left frustrated. And you'll be hurting those around you. Honestly, if you think about it this way, if all they hear from you is, I wish I was spending time with them, I wish it was the way it was before, I wish it used to be like, it used to be like this and now it's not. All they hear is, they're failing you at every turn. And that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good. It worsens the relationship that you currently have right now. We sacrifice our present for our past. That's backwards. So don't chase the glory days. Don't try to do that. Back to kind of where we're talking our topic today. Relationships and finding peace in our relationships can feel almost impossible. Like when we get down to it, it's like, I don't know if that's possible. There's so many things that have been put into this relationship at this point. I don't know if it's possible anymore. And we say things like, well, if he just wasn't so selfish, then maybe. If she didn't drink so much, you got real quiet in here. Or if he would just listen to me, then we could have peace. But he doesn't listen to me, so then it's not my fault. We're not going to have peace because he's not listening to me. Or maybe if she would value my opinion, my perspective as much as the stranger she met at Costco 5 minutes ago, maybe then we could have peace. Is that too close to home? I don't know. But this is why we need rules in a relationship. And I'm not saying that these rules are going to fix all the relationships that we have. I am going to say that relationships are incredibly important. God created us for relationship. He has that in this part of his DNA. We are relationship driven. We have this in us. It is important in order for us to navigate these relationships. And like I said, I'm not saying that the rules we're going to go with are going to fix everything. This is not a fix-all, be-all. But it is going to help. It's going to be a resource. It's going to help you move in the direction of health in your relationships. So relationship rule number 1 that we introduced last week. I will treat every person as someone Jesus died for because they are and he did. It is difficult, right? If we look at them as someone that Jesus actually died for, we look at someone through the lens that Jesus looks through to see them. We see them as someone that he loves just as much as he loves you and me. Well, that doesn't make sense because they're wrong all the time. That's not how Jesus sees them. He sees them as his son or his daughter. He loves them. He died for them. If we start to see them in this light, we start to treat them differently. If we treat someone differently, we start to feel differently about them. And we might be at odds with them in some regards, in some areas of our life, but as a whole, that vision piece, that sight piece, seeing them as Jesus sees them changes everything. Changes everything. So today we're going to get into another rule today, but we're going to look at one verse primarily. It is also from Romans. We had a verse last week we looked at from Romans. This is another verse from Romans. And Paul wrote this, the Apostle Paul. We'll get into his story in just a little bit. But Paul wrote this, and it's more than just like a letter. It's like a full body of work, this book that we call Romans. He wrote it to the Christians that are in Rome at this time. And if I could kind of nutshell it a little bit, and there's a lot in it, but if I could condense it down, it's almost like Paul saying, hey, just remember, this is what Jesus did for you. Now we should live in response to that. And that has ramifications in our relationships. Not that we're trying to earn back, not we're trying to be good enough for God to have actually sacrificed that for us. But we should live in response to that. We should recognize what he's done and then live in response to that. And there's absolutely a relational element to this. So in Romans chapter 12, verse 18, and this one stings a bit. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. There's kind of three individual parts to this. If it is possible at all, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone? I mean, Paul, come on. That's ridiculous. That's not it. It can't. What are you talking about? Paul must not have, if you read this, you're like, Paul must not have known anything about conflict. I guess 2,000 years ago, they just didn't have conflict like we do today. Because if he was in my shoes, if Paul was experiencing what I experienced, if Paul had the family that I have, if Paul was in the chaos of relationship that I've been through, he would not say, live at peace with everyone. That doesn't work. Well, let me get you up to date on Paul. Paul used to be known as Saul. He was a Pharisee. This is a teacher of the law. So he grew up from a young age prioritizing the knowledge of the holy book, right? The law and the prophets. He learned in the temple and the synagogue, and he enjoyed this so much, he was passionate about this so much that this became his entire identity. It's who he was. He would describe himself, so he became a teacher of the law, known as a Pharisee. He would describe himself as a Pharisee of Pharisees, meaning he knew the law as good or better than anyone. And he could tell you and everybody else where they were missing it. Right? This was what Paul saw. And Paul also saw that anything that undermined this temple system, the sacrificial system, what was in place for the Jewish religion to be, for its foundation, if anything was undermining that, then he took it personally as something he needed to eradicate. He needed to do away with. So the Jesus movement shows up, which absolutely is undermining the power and the authority of the temple. Because all of a sudden, Jesus made the sacrifice once and for all. You no longer have to go to the temple to make your sacrifices because Jesus is our sacrifice. So that power, that authority, that being under the thumb of the religious leaders, that was being challenged. Paul did not like that. The religious leaders did not like that. So Paul did whatever it took to try to eradicate that. So if that meant to arrest people, if that meant to beat people, if that meant even to oversee stoning people, like they stoned them to death, he would do it. He was part of it. And he did that with passion in order to make sure that what he believed in maintained in place, was there in place. Now, Paul had this experience on the road to Damascus one time where all of a sudden he met a resurrected Jesus. So Jesus actually in heaven he's already ascended to heaven. But this bright light shows up, blinds him, like literally blinds him. And Jesus speaks to him, Paul, why are you persecuting me? Why are you persecuting me? And this was so real. This experience that he had was so powerful that it changed everything for him. His entire world changed. His values changed. His priorities changed. He'd been wearing the Team Temple jersey for a while now, his entire life. And in that moment, he takes off the Team Temple jersey. He's like, I can no longer be doing what I was doing. My world has changed. It's shifted. But imagine this. You grew up with the same people, the same group of people, and you became a religious leader. You had a place of authority. You had a leadership place with a lot of people that trusted you, a lot of people that listened to you, a lot of people that leaned into you. And then you turned your back on them. He abandoned them. He became like a traitor to them. Public enemy, numero uno. That's what Paul became for that entire group of people. Now, at the same time, right, so Paul not only took off the Team Temple jersey, he tries to put on the Jesus jersey, the Team Jesus jersey. And when he does this, everybody else that's already on the team, they're looking at Paul like, are you trying to be a spy? Is that you trying to work in to like wipe us out from the inside out? Because you had my brother beaten. I know that you killed one of my old friends. You've had me arrested. The people that he was trying to join with, they had experience. They heard all the rumors. They knew what he'd done. They didn't trust him at all. They isolated him. They kept him at arm's distance. They didn't want him to be part of the team. So now Paul has the religious leaders, the temple on one side that now hate him. And he has the other people on the other side that he has absolutely persecuted. And they're not really too thrilled with him either. So, does Paul know anything about conflict? Paul had a degree in conflict. And it wasn't a minor degree, it was a major degree. Paul knew and understood about conflict. And he understood that if you want peace in your life, if you want peace in your relationships, it doesn't come easily. You have to fight for it. You have to sacrifice for it. And he said, yes, it might not be possible. If it is possible, meaning it might not be possible. It might be too far gone. You might be at odds too much. They might not ever see it, even close to the way that you see it, and there's no possibility for that relationship to be fully mended or to even have peace in it. But if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, do whatever you can in order to bring peace back into the relationship. Put effort to see if it's even possible. You can't look at this from a distance and be like, yeah, that's too far gone. I'm going to just keep on going this way. That's not what Paul's asking us to do. Paul's asking us to put effort into. There's another verse that's in the Old Testament. This is one of the Psalms. And from a young age, I remember kind of having this light bulb moment when I read this. I remember being in my room. I think it was junior high. And I read this and I thought, oh my goodness, there's just so much insight into what David wrote. And in Psalm 34, he says, turn from evil and do good. And if we stop there, it's like, oh, okay. Way to state the obvious. All right. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. This is not something that you just like sneak up on and it sits still and lets you like approach it and you're just like, oh, this is peace. You just easily walk up and take it. No, you have to seek it out. You have to go find it. You have to go search for it. You have to pursue it. It's like it's going to flee from you almost. It's going to be running from you. You've got to go chase it down. Nonstop, consistently, constantly. Again, David knew about conflict, and he knew the value of peace, that it must be sought out. It must be pursued consistently. This is, when we have differences in our relationships, but there's a perspective change that has to happen. Right? The value that we see in someone changes if they have a different opinion than we do. Have you recognized this in your life? They bring a different opinion to the table. They vote a different way than you do. And all of a sudden, their value drops in your eyes. You don't seek them out quite as much. You change how you see them as a whole. Now, this change of value greatly impacts our ability for peace. Right? When we devalue someone, it doesn't make it easier to have peace in that relationship. It makes it more and more difficult. And the way that Paul is describing this pursuit of peace, the way that Paul is describing this aspect of relationship, he's like, you need to follow Jesus because Jesus is going to lead you there. Jesus is going to take you there. He's a tour guide, probably more like a Sherpa. He's going to pack your burdens and ask you to follow him too. He's like, this way, guys. And you're just going to need to follow Jesus. Jesus will lead you there if you follow him. But in doing so, we dare not take value away from someone. We have to see other people. Remember, like last week, we got to see people as the value that Jesus placed in them, that God placed in them at the creation of them. They have intrinsic value in them. Let's say it this way. Value is a bridge for peace. Value is a bridge for peace. When you step back from opinion and decide to see value in someone instead, you're like, you know what? We can be at odds. We can have a difference of opinion. But if I see you as someone that is valuable, that bridges the gap. That allows us to move back towards peace. And there's no promise here that we're absolutely going to catch peace. There's no promise that Paul says, if you seek it, you'll find it. It's going to be there. It's not that easy. But we must give chase for it. It's too important. It's too valuable for us not to. Now, I was thinking about this last week. We change, right? Season to season in life, we change. Our perspective changes. I've heard it said that if you're not changing how you view the world once every about 7 years, if you look back about 7 years and you don't see the world a little bit differently, then you have not actually grown, right? So Luke, my son, is now 6 years old, and he's been going to kindergarten this year. He actually played soccer earlier. He's playing baseball now. And each little group of people that he gets around, it's like his world expands a little bit more. All of a sudden, and this is the fun part, all of a sudden he sees that there's other people like him. He's like, oh my goodness, there's other people. There's other kids my age out there. And they like to do things too. And sometimes it's the wrong things. Like, but there's other people in this world like me. But there's something that transitions, something shifts. He's on a baseball team right now with a couple of kids that are a little bit older than him. And although he sees them as people that are similar to him, they're starting to see kids on their own team that are different than them. They're seeing the differences rather than similarities. Those differences, though, can be tricky. Because the more that we see someone as different than us, the easier it is to change how we see them with value or not. Historically, we haven't done this very well, right? You think back through the history of humanity, and as soon as we see something different than ourselves, it's like we go back to that first and second grade mindset. It's like, you're different than me, I don't like you. You're different than me, you're not good enough. That's the mindset that we have. It's so natural for us to get right back into that. And unfortunately, the church hasn't done a great job of this either. You think differently than me, therefore you don't have value. We can go pretty deep on that route, right? There's some history there. But when we look back at this verse, Romans chapter 12, verse 18, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Paul doesn't say, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, as long as they look like you, think like you, act like you, talk like you. He doesn't have all those other things. He just says, as far as it depends on you. The other person's not even described in this sentence, in this thought. We dare not give up our responsibility that Paul is describing just because someone is different than us. And sometimes we think, well, I made an effort. I put my best foot forward. I made an effort in that direction. There's a difference than making an effort and exhausting all of our efforts. One is just about checking a box. Yeah, I put some effort into it. Done. The other is a consistent movement in the direction of. And it might not ever happen, but to put the energy and effort into moving towards peace. That's what we're going to talk about the rest of the morning today. There's a statement that I love and hate. It's you do you. You do you. And honestly, I hate it more than I like it. It can be good or evil. That's why. It can be good or evil. It can be used as an excuse. And often today it is. You do you. This is an excuse to be arrogant. It's an excuse to be selfish. It's an excuse to be entitled. You do you. You're like, I'm doing me. That's what I'm going to do. I do what I feel like I should do. Right? This is an excuse that we use. It's a mask that we wear. You do you. I don't like it most of the time. However, there are instances where it's actually good. When I'm having the conversation with my son before I drop him off at school, and I tell him, Luke, God created you. God is in you. God loves you. You have those values. You have those priorities in your life. And not everybody has recognized those values and priorities. They don't all live like you do. I want you to be the best version of you. You do you. It's this empowering. You don't have to be like other people because it is okay. It is actually good for him to not be like other people. It's good for us to not be like everybody else. You do you. It's what we tell our college roommate when he's going on that first date. Like, all right, don't try to pretend to be somebody else just to get her to like you. We care too much about them. We want you to be you, the best version of you, but don't change for anybody else because you are enough. And if they don't see it that way, then that's their loss and somebody else will. It's what we tell people when they're going for a job interview. You just do you. Don't project. Don't pretend. You do you and you are enough. Right? And some of you need to hear that today. Some of you need to know that God tells you you are enough. He loves you. He cares about you. He's placed that in you. He's placed his thumbprint on you. You are his son and daughter. You are enough. So you do you. The way that we're looking at today, though, you do you, is this way. Don't worry about what you can't control. You can only control yourself. You can't control somebody else. It's not you do them. It's you do you. You have to do what only you can do. And some people, unfortunately, there's this phrase that's used a lot today. People live in the rent-free headspace, right? Where someone is taking up so much of your thoughts, so much of your energy, so much of your ideas. Like you're just sitting there stewing at the red light. And it's not even about the drivers around you. It's about work from yesterday or the last week. It's that employee, that coworker, whoever it might be. You're just angry and upset. And you're giving all this emotional energy and time and headspace to this person. And you know what? All that time and energy, it doesn't help. And in fact, it's just taking up what could be beneficial, positive, thoughts and processes. You could be working to better the situation rather than just getting angrier and angrier and angrier about it. It's not beneficial. So we've got to shift that to personal responsibility and accountability, which everyone says, ooh, gross. You said a dirty word, you said a bad word at church. Personal accountability. Nobody likes that. We don't like that. We don't like to hear that. But when it comes to our relationships, we dare not give away our part. Paul isn't saying if you'd like to. He's saying this is a mandate. This is a requirement. This is not just a recommendation. If you're going to follow Jesus, this is what it looks like. Pursue peace. That's what it looks like. That's what David says. Pursue it. Seek it out. If this is where you're at, we need to stop and evaluate those difficult relationships. And I know, talking about difficult relationships, you've already thought of 2 or 3, right? You're like, which one am I going to pick? But here's the question. Which part's yours? Which part's theirs? Do the pie graph, percentage-wise. Okay, what's their part of what's their part? Is it 50-50, 50%? No. No, their piece is much bigger than that. Is it 75-25? Is it 90-10? I don't know what your percent is, but here's what I do know. In any relationship, you have a percent. Because there's 2 people in that relationship. It's never 100-0. There's a part, there's a piece that you carry. There's a responsibility. There's a burden that is only on you. So what's a step? What's a step that you can take towards peace? And I hate to use cliches, but what would Jesus do? Bring back the bracelets, right? What would Jesus do? Last week we talked about this in verse 8, chapter 5. While we were still sinners, this is what Paul writes, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You want to know what Jesus did? He gave up his life. And he didn't give up his life on our best days, when we're doing everything right, we're being super loving and super kind and generous and all those things. He died for us while we were still sinners, broken, while we're still hurting other people. And he knows it. It's not a secret. He still died for us. That's the direction that we move. That's how we approach peace in this. David in Psalm, again, seek peace and pursue it. This isn't just let peace try to find me. This is a hunt that we're going on to find peace. This is not a one-time thing. This is ongoing. It's directionally consistent. There's always something that we can do. Always. It's like being a perfectionist about peace. You know what a perfectionist does? They do something, they look at it, they're like, I can do better. They tinker with it. They look at it again, they're like, yeah, but this part's not quite right. They do it again. They never stop trying to improve it. That's a perfectionist. That's why I love math, because math has a single right answer. It's like, I did it. It's perfect. 2 + 2 = 4. Perfect answer. I can cross it off the list. I don't have to work on it anymore. This leads us, not the math part, but this leads us, this idea, to rule number 2. I will do all I can do to keep peace with all people. I will do all I can do to keep peace with all people. Anybody like golf? That was a right turn in there. I love golf. I love playing golf. I love taking naps while I watch golf. It's almost like they designed this sport to take naps in. It's the most beautiful sceneries. Like, it just puts you at ease. Like, there's peace in your life in that moment. They pipe in nature sounds. There's birds chirping in the air. The announcers are whispering. It's like, hey, I know he's about to fall asleep, so can you just keep it quiet now? I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing for a nap. And it takes forever, too. So you can fall asleep for a while, and you wake back up, and it's still going. To me, you didn't miss a whole lot. One thing about golf, though, if you play golf, and I play golf, I'm not good at it. I'm not a scratch golfer. I'm not even close to that. But there's a saying, you drive for show, you putt for dough. Meaning the important part about golf, in order to have the best result, is your putting. It's that once you get on the green is the most important part. So when I putt, I walk up and I do what I'm supposed to do. I kind of get down on my balls level and I look at it and I try to figure out okay, how am I going to read the green? Which way is it going to roll? Is there a right to left, or what are we talking? Is it uphill, downhill? Try to figure out how hard I need to hit it, and then I hit it. That's what I do. If you watch really good golfers, they do that, and then they stand up, and then they walk clear around to the other side, and they look at it. They look through the hole to their ball. Why do they do that? Because when you get to the other side, when you get on the other side, there we go. We're getting there. When we get on, there we go. When you get on the other side, you see what you couldn't see. That's why they do that. It changes. You think you see everything right. You think you see it perfectly. You get on the other side, all of a sudden it's different. All of a sudden you see things that you didn't before. This is empathy. Right? This is empathy. As far as it depends on you, here's the beautiful thing about empathy. Nobody on the face of the planet can stop you from practicing empathy. Nobody can. The person that's upset with you, the person that's not inviting you to anything anymore, the person that's not speaking to you, the one that's not answering your phone or the text or whatever, that person can't stop you from practicing empathy. They can't. And empathy does this amazing thing. It moves us in the direction of peace. That walk around to the other side, it takes time. It takes energy. It's difficult, right? And so many people say, no, you just trust your own eyes. Don't look through their eyes. Just trust your own eyes, right? You do you. See, I told you I don't like it. You do you. No. Empathy says, no, I'm going to look through their eyes to see if they see something differently than I do. I'm going to see what that looks like from the other side. We can keep on. There we go. Empathy moves you towards them in peace in the relationship. Empathy moves you towards peace and them in the relationship. But that's what empathy does. So we're going to talk about, in the last couple minutes here this morning, we're going to talk about empathy. There are 4 questions to get you help to walk to that other side, to see it from their perspective. First of all, first question, Would you be willing to take on their perspective? Would you be willing to do this? That means that you don't get to defend yourself. Right? We're not going to work on an argument. We're not going to work on our debate skills or our rebuttal skills. Would you put all that down and just allow yourself, be willing to take on their perspectives? What is it like to be them? What's their history? Why do they see it the way that they do? Is there something that they grew through? Is there a current circumstance right now that they're dealing with that might have an impact on what they're doing with you and your relationship? It might not even be about your relationship. They could be dealing with something entirely different, but it's bleeding out into your relationship. And without some empathy, we would never see that. We would never realize that. Question number 2. Would you be willing to suspend your own judgment? And this is hard, right? When you're standing in their shoes, don't be evaluating if they're standing in the right spot. It's just their spot they're standing in. It's not right or wrong. This is their perspective. This is their viewpoint. So what does that look like? What does that feel like? Don't actively be determining whether they're right or wrong when you're trying to stand in their shoes, because it's going to undermine the whole process. Question number 3, would you recognize their emotion? And I'm going to pick on guys here for a second because it's a stereotype thing, I know. But there's stereotypes for a reason often. Right? We have to expand as men. We got to expand our emotional vocabulary. Not everything is either angry or frustrated. How do you feel? Angry. Are you sure? Maybe frustrated. Those are the only 2 options I've got. There's more than this. When you ask them, when you start to figure out what emotion they're feeling, do they feel insecure about this? Is it that they feel left out? Maybe they feel unheard? Maybe they feel taken advantage of. How do they feel? What's the emotion that they're struggling with, that they're working out in this moment? And this is where it goes to like the beyond 101 to like 201, 301. This last question. Would you be willing to communicate that emotion? Now, whoa, hold on. This isn't you sitting in your spot saying, hey, how come you feel insecure right now? That's not going to go well. Ask questions, don't tell them. Don't define them how they feel. Ask questions about it. Hey, I understand that I've upset you. I would really like to understand more about that. How are you feeling about this? What is it? What have I said? What have I done that puts something in the middle of this relationship? And once you do that, they might not engage. They might not be ready for that. Or they just might not want to. You can't force them to. But if they do, you are walking on hallowed ground. Like, it is dangerous now. That's even more dangerous. You know why? Because if they engage with you in this conversation, they are opening up to vulnerability. They're telling you something that they're trusting you with. So, in this moment, if they do, phones stay in the pocket. TV stays off. Do not be distracted in this moment. Don't be looking around. Don't be trying to process and think about what you're going to say back to them. Listen to what they're telling you. Because this is the key. When they finally tell you what emotion they're dealing with, it allows you to feel it. It allows you that empathy part. It allows you to move back towards them. It allows you to see clearly that you haven't been able to see before. And it allows you ultimately to move towards peace in this relationship. Now, as difficult as this is, and as much as it might not be possible, right? Paul tells us this. It might not be possible. If it is possible. But there's good news. The good news is this. You can find peace about the relationship even when there's not peace in the relationship. Meaning, even if they're not ready for that peace, or they're not ever going to be ready for that peace, if it's not possible, you can still have peace about the relationship. When you've done everything that you can, when you're moving towards empathy, when you're doing those things, you can have peace all of a sudden. Even though there's turmoil, even though there's tension, it's like that burden is removed. We don't feel to that depth. We don't feel that same thing that we used to. Over and over throughout the entire New Testament, the authors, the writers, they continue to tell us to keep peace and to maintain unity. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3, there's another Paul letter that he wrote. Ephesians, here we go. Make every effort to keep unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. You just continue to move there. You just continue to prioritize it. You can continue to move in that direction. Even if it's not possible, you continue to process it. Continue to move in that direction. Pursue it. Back to our verse, one final time. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. We talk about following Jesus, not just believing in Jesus, we talk about following Jesus, what that looks like, that there's action steps that we have to take in order to look and pattern our lives after Jesus. This is what it looks like. In our relationships, to follow him means to prioritize peace, means to practice empathy. It means to move to their side and look at it from a different angle. It means to maintain that value that they have and they hold, to see them as someone of worth. Paul doesn't promise peace. He doesn't say you're absolutely going to find peace in your relationships. However, he does promise in another spot that by entrusting him, by entrusting God with what we're dealing with, by bringing to the table our struggles and our frustrations about our relationships, that God can bring back peace to you. Maybe not in the relationship, but God can bring back peace to you, and it goes beyond our understanding. It's why in those moments where you watch someone that's actively following Jesus, and they're going through it, and you look at him and you're like, how are you relaxed right now? How do you have peace right now? Because there's a peace that doesn't make sense to our natural world. There's this gift from God that God brings and places his peace. When we pursue it, when we pursue him, he places his peace in us. So, one final time, let's kind of go through the whole deal through this series so far. Rule number 1, I will treat every person as someone Jesus died for because they are, and he did. Rule number 2, I will do all I can do to keep peace with all people. Not just people like me, not just people I like, but with all people. Now, we do have some discussion questions because we want this conversation not to end here in this hour. Right? This doesn't fix all the relationships. We want to take this conversation, bring it outside of this building to where your relationships are living, and allow it to impact and try to move in the direction of peace. So, some questions to help us get there. Do you have relationships where you think peace is impossible? That might be, but why do you think that is? Why do you think it might be impossible? Next question. What is... Did I miss it? Oh, this is it. Is empathy something you excel at? Or is empathy an opportunity for growth? Which is a very gentle way of saying you're not very good at it. Why is practicing empathy so difficult? That's a fun one to stew over. What is a practical next step for you to pursue peace in your relationships? And I know our tendency, empathy, like we've been talking about all day. Not just empathy, but how will you implement specifically empathy in relationships today? What can you do this week to implement empathy? Let me pray. We'll close out. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you've done for us. Continue to do for us. Continue to open the door for us to move towards peace. God, I pray that you would shine the light, that you would keep our eyes open, that you would allow us to have the perspective of the value of relationships in our life, how important they are, how much they add to our life, how much they add to the quality of our life, the enjoyment of our life as a whole, and how much you have placed relationships in our pathway. And I pray that we would do whatever we can in order to value and protect those relationships. God, you are a good God, and you want good things for your children. You want good things for us, your creation. So Lord, I pray that we would take the difficult, hard steps through empathy in the direction of peace for those relationships. This is not a one-time decision. Relationship entropy is something that we all struggle with, and we must consistently be pursuing peace in those relationships in order for it to be maintained and to grow. God, we thank you that you do that for us. God, we love you. We thank you that you first loved us. In your name I pray. Amen.